Okay, we're at the two dots on the bottom of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Like all these cases, it starts with Ha'udam Alechavre My Boys Bahayara. As usual, Ruvain is the aggrieved party, is the plaintiff, and he says to Shimon, "Why are you on my land?" Amalei minach zavinta. I bought it from you. Bahashtara, and I've even got a star. Amalei star zayfahu. So Shimon implicitly acknowledged that Reuben had owned it first, but he says, "I have a star that shows that you sold it to me." So Reuben said back to him, "Amalei star zayfahu." It's a full star. I don't agree with the star, even though the star was fully mekuyim. It had two Edom on it. The Edom were approved. They had verified their signatures, and to all intents and purposes, it looks like a fully valid star. Gachen lachash le'lerabba. Shimon whispered to Rabbah, the Dayan, in Shtar Zayfahu. He's right. It happens to be. It is a full star. Reuven was very, very astute, and he recognized that the star was slightly different than what they had originally agreed to. But even though it looked, to all intents and purposes, it could have been used. There was nothing on it that showed that it was not true. Miu, so Shimon, like we said, was maskim. He admitted ex parte, outside of court. He whispered to Rabbah. He didn't admit it to the other disputant. He said it's true. It is a false star. Miu star mal yahavali. I did have the whole story is true. I really did buy it from Reuven, and he gave me a star, but I lost it, Verkis, and I lost it. Ba'amina, and I thought, Inket hai biyade koldehu. He said, let me at least come to Besdin holding something, so I'm not going to look like a fool just coming to say that it's mine. Amar Rabba said, Mal l'shakar. He has a migul, right? Shimon, who's admitting that the star, proving that Reuven, he admitted that Reuven originally owned it, and he's saying that Reuven sold it to him. He has a migul. Iboy Amar Star Malihu. He could have stuck with his original story. He didn't have to whisper to Rabbah that it was a full star. He could have said it's a full-fledged star. There's nothing wrong with it, and no one had detected anything wrong with the star. And he could have got. And the fact that all that you can get, all Reuven's complaining and butchering about it, will accomplish is that it has to be Mekuyim, and it was Mekuyim. How it became Mekuyim is a little hard to understand. The Rashbam gives a bunch of different stories. Either the whole thing, he was Mezayif the Kiyam also, right? A Kiyam he wrote that the Bezdin, he put the stamp of the Bezdin saying that it's Mekuyim. Or it could even be that the Edim were fooled. He made such a good forgery of their signatures that they believed it was their signature. And the truth is, according to him, they do remember actually signing a star. And this looked like their signature. They remembered signing a star, so they didn't have a reason to think it was false. So, Amalei Rabbi Yosef, so he had a migul that he could have gone with the star. Amalei Rabbi Yosef, Amai Samachta Hai Star. Rabbi Yosef disagreed. He said this is not a valid migul. He disagreed with Rabbah. Hai Star Chasba Balmu. This star is a worthless star, meaning the way the Rashbam explains it is he says it's almost daima to what we had before. I'm going to have later on. It's a migu b'makam edim. That means he's admitting this star is worthless. So you're trying to let's see the Rashbam quickly. He has no chazak on his part. The kivin the oidi. Since he admitted that it's false, it's false. It's not similar to a regular migu. Where he has what he's actually claiming and what he could have. It's similar to a mali l'shaka where you're saying amigu. I'm saying taina B, but I could have said taina A, which is an even better taina. But we said if taina A is contradicted, if taina B is contradicted by Adam, we don't believe him. This that he has any kind of leverage here is only because of the star. He's coming to say I could have stuck with the star that's false. It's as if you have a star by Makam Edom. It's even better than the Makam Edom. You yourself admit that the star is worthless. It's not. So you're saying you could have tied something, but you're tying something that's connected the Edis. You connected the facts that this is not a valid star. It's one thing if you say, I tied it. I was, for example, like let's say he said I owed. He says I was moide b'mixes, and I could have been kaifer b'kail and then been mutter, which is theoretically a migu. I mean, there's problems with that also, but in general, that would be a good migu l'chatchila because there's nothing against him saying that he's a moide b'mixes. It's not. We don't have a proof against it, but over here he's saying this star is a valid star. That's not a valid taina. Good. So that's where we come out. It's a machlokes, Rabba and Rav Yosef. Ahu the amalei lechavre. Havli meyazuze de basiknabach v'hashtar. This is really the same discussion that we just had, just with a different type of taina. Shimon says to Ruvain, "Give me the 100 zuz that I gave you, v'hashtar, and here's the star." Amalei, Reuben said back to him, "Star is zayfahu. This star is a false star." Gachan lachash le'lerabba. Shimon said to Rabba, "In star is zayfa. Miu star malya haveli vertis." The same thing. There was a star that Reuven owed me the money, but I lost that star, and this star is presentable. No one can tell that it's a mezuyah. V'amina inket pai biyadei koldu. Amarava malu l'shakar by amalishtar malu. Rabba says the same time. I could have said he has a migu. Therefore, this tayin should get his money because he could have stuck and insisted that the star was a valid star. Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says the same time if I cared that since the star itself is an invalid star, it's similar, it's equivalent to a migu b'makam edim, because you're trying to prove something that is not true. You're trying to prove that this star is a valid star, but it's not a valid star. Amar v'di baravin hilchos hakavosi de Rabba ba'ara, hilchos hakavosi de Rabbi Yosef bezuzi. So it sounds like the two cases are exactly the same, but you say the halacha is different. In one case, in the first case, legabe the ara, where Ruvain is saying it's my land, and now Shimon is holding the land and saying I should be able to keep the land because I have a star that Ruvain sold it to me. In that case, halacha is like Rabba, that we believe his migu. But in the case where Shimon has a star that says that Reuven owes him money, but now the money is by Reuven, and he's trying to be Motzei Mammon from Reuven through this star that he admits himself, Shimon himself admits it's Mazuyev star, is Rabbi Yosef that we don't accept the migu. We've passed on like Rabba, like the land, because it stays where it is. And now the Gemara didn't really clarify that earlier, but now it's clarifying that we're talking about where Shimon, the one who's saying that it was sold to me, is currently in possession. He doesn't have a Cheskes Gimel Shanim, then he could have said a migu that I bought it and I have a chazaka, and then he doesn't have to depend on the star, but he's a muchzik that he's holding on to it. Where you're trying to be Motzei Mammon with this star that is admittedly invalid, we don't accept a migu to take away money from someone else.
If we have Adam, why don't we try to be Makayim the star? At least Makayim was
Adam for what? What the Eidim here are on the star. We're talking about the signatures on the star, but it doesn't mean that they. Doesn't mean that they. If you're right, if they would remember that the sale had happened, then Einachanami, they could be Eidim. I think you're right that it could be Eidim that it was sold. But all they're saying is we recognize our signatures on the star. More than that, we don't remember. Also, that you don't write the star and get it signed at the time of the sale. What you do is you go in advance, you write the star, and then the seller gives the star mechira to the buyer, so he'll have something to prove his case in the future. But it's not how you make a kinyan of kesef on star on karka. Karka is nikah kesef. So what you'll do is you'll hand over money, and you'll that's how you'll be kind of the kesef. It's not you can be kind of with star. That's handing over the star. You don't write the star. The Eidim are not necessarily witnesses to the transaction. The witnesses to the star. So you can't go ask the Eidim what happened.
Where are we up to?
We're at the 2 dots. We're about to start the 2 dots on Lamed Beis Amud Beis. About 2/3 of the way down. Okay? Hahu Arba. So this case to me, it seems a little bit needlessly complicated, but it's not really so complicated. There was a guarantor. The Amalei L'Loiva. So let's call the Arva, the guarantor, Shimon. The Amalei L'Loiva, he said to the borrower. So Ruvain, I don't know if I hope I'm getting the best names for this, but Ruvain had borrowed money from Levi, right? And Levi went to Shimon and said, or Ruvain went to Shimon and said, I want you to be an Arab. I want you to guarantee Ruvain's loan. Ruvain owns me. He wants to borrow money. I don't trust Ruvain. He doesn't come through. Every case in Basra so far where someone has lent money to Ruvain, it's come to tears. Hasn't worked out well. So I want a guarantor. So Shimon agreed to be the guarantor. And now, of course, what happened was they had made a kind of guarantee where he has a choice of going to Ruvain or Shimon. And Ruvain, as always, doesn't have money to pay. So he went to Shimon. Levi went to Shimon to get his money, and he got the money. So he went back. So now Shimon is going to Ruvain. The Amalei L'Loiva, Havli Me'azuzi de Parati, L'Malva. I want you to pay me back the $100 that I had given to Levi since I was guaranteeing your loan. And here's and he shows the star, meaning the star that Ruvain had originally given to Levi when he borrowed the money. Now, when Shimon, as the guarantor, paid up the loan, he got the star from the Malva. The Malva doesn't keep it. When he gets paid up, he gives up the star. And now Shimon is holding it. He goes back to the original borrower and says, "You owe me $100 because I had to cover for you." So in essence, what we have here, with all these shenanigans, is that Ruvain owes money to Shimon, which is where we always end up. Amalei la praticha. Ruvain says to him, "What are you coming to me for money? I was just in your office a week ago and I paid you this money." Amalei la vadadu shaklini minai. It's true, I paid you, but then you paid me, but then you asked me for the money right back, and I gave it back to you. Shachar Ravidi Baravan lekamei da'abaya. Ravidi Baravan asked, Ki hagav namai. What's the din? And as we're going to see in a second, the issue here is really the same issue like we had before. Because by Shimon saying that by Shimon saying that you paid me back, and then I relent you the money. We're using that same star piroyan, the star that I had gotten from Levi, as the basis to which to collect it. That star is no longer a good star. The rule, like we saw in Subas, is once a star is paid up, you can't reuse the same star for a second loan. So really, we're ending up at the same place as the previous case on the top of the Amud, that it's a star mezuyif. It's not a mezuyif, it's not counterfeit, but it's a useless star. It's a chaspa b'yalma. And he's trying to use that to get the loan. So he said, what's the din? This is really the same case where he's trying to be gaiva with a invalid star, And we said it's the din is like Rabbi Yosef. You're coming to be goyva mammon. You're trying to take away money from Ruvain using a star that's invalid. Even though you could say I could claim that it's a valid star and I never paid you, I never had to admit that I had given you the money, that you had given the money and I relent it. I could have just said that it's still the original loan, in which case it would be valid. But according to Rabbi Yosef, legabe mammon, you can't be Motzei with such a migu. The heichad the ukma zuzi lukma, that we leave the money where it is. So the Gemara says, so that's his psak. It should be like Rabbi Yosef. He shouldn't be able to get the money away. This is only where Shimon is saying that Ruvain went ahead and paid me the money, the $100, and then I went and lent it back to him. So at this point, this is an invalid shtar. But if Shimon's time was slightly different, it wasn't that he had given the money to Ruvain, and now then he gave it. Reuven gave him the money, and then he returned the money back to Reuven in a new loan. But rather, Reuven had paid him these red coins, these tarnished coins that were not valid currency. So he said, "I'm rejecting this. I'm not makabel it." So the original loan never expired. It wasn't that it was paid back. He said, "You try to pay me back with something that wasn't good." So then the star is still a valid star. So in that case, akat isil shibud the star. Then the shibud is still extant, and he still has a good migu. He actually has a good star to be guided from him. Something what? Rava bar Sharshim, nafak aleh kala the ka'achal aradiyas. Rava bar Sharshim was he had lent money to Ruvain. And as we're going to see in the Gemara in a minute, and is explained in the Rashbam, he took a mashkin on that money. Took a mashkin on that money from Ruvain. Rav Bar Shashim took a mashkin, and he did a mashkanta de surya, where he keeps the land in order to avoid ribis. He keeps the land, and he makes up that each year $100. It's $1,000 loan. And each year I'm going to take off $100 from the loan because of the payers that I'm going to get from it for each year. And after 10 years, the loan is going to be fully paid up. But what happened over here is that people said Rava Bar Shashim held on to the property more than 10 years. It was past the time. Reuven had died, and his children yarshened his land. This piece of land was in the hands of his creditor, his lender, Rava Bar Shashim, and Amalei. So, and that he was still taking the payers from the karka that belongs to the Yisrael. Amalei Abaya, Emily Easy Gufa de Uvda Hechehav. So Abaya asked him to explain to me exactly what happened over here, and he's going to explain what we just said. Amalei Arab Mashkunta Havanakitna Meavuin. Rava Bar Shashim said, I got this karka as a mashkin on a loan that I borrowed from their father, the Yasmi, of these current Yisraelim. In addition to that $1,000 that was paid off over 10 years, there was another $500, separate $500 loan that Reuven owed me. And the 10 years of the mashkin were up, Amina. And I thought, Im Hadrana Arali Yasmi, if at the end of the 10 years I give back the karka to the Yisraelim, and then I say, oh, by the way, there's another $500 that your father owes me with no mashkin on it. Whoever wants to pay from Nichse Yisraelim, you have to make a shvua to take away from Yisraelim. You can't be Motzei mom, and even with a star, whatever the case is, you have to make a star because they are not able to be tying for themselves. And he didn't want to make a shvua. As we all know, you're supposed to avoid making shvuas, even if they're true, if at all possible. I'm going to put away the star mashkin that says that I get to keep it for 10 years. I'll eat for another 5 years. I'll get another $500 of Paris out of this karka. He says, you know what I could have done? I've been on this karka for 10 years. I have a chazaka. No one's complaining about it. And I could have just said, it's mine. I bought it from the father, and I could keep it forever. And therefore, you should believe me, even now, when I say that I have money by you.
Why does he have a chazaka? I mean, we know there's a document of a loan.
We don't know the document of a mash, but he's holding the star. It's a star mashkin, right? How do we know that the star? Like we said, he's going to say, he's hiding the star mashkin. We don't have the star in our hands. He's the one holding the star. Can't use it against him. So he said, this is not a. They said to Rava Bar Sharshim, you don't have a valid chazaka. This whole thing started because there was a koil saying that he was holding this karka that belonged to Yisrael, that he had gotten as a mashkin, and he had overstayed his welcome. So this means that even he's saying I had a chazaka even when the father was holding on it, but there was already a koil going out that it wasn't his. So a koil is not worse than a macha. And like we said, if the only reason you're believed of the chazaka, normally a person has to hold on to a star. If he wants to say I lost my star, he can only do that if there's no macha. But over here we have something that's even better than macha. There's a koil coming out that it doesn't belong to him. It's in the public. Said to him, no, you're stuck. You're going to have to return the karka, and then you can't. Your 10 years are up, and the other $500 you're going to have to go make a shvua. And you have to wait till the gedolim to do it because you can't make a shvua. Can't even take from the assignment with a shvua until they're gedolim, that they're able to take care of their own tinus. Rav Idi bar Oven Shachiv. Rav Idi bar Oven's relative died. Shavak Dikla, he left over a palm tree. Rav Idi bar Oven Amar Anok Krivatfei. Idi bar Oven said, I am the closest relative. I'm his first cousin, and there's no one else close. Ahu Gavra Amar Anok Krivatfei. There's other guy who said, no, Rav Idi bar Oven is really a second cousin. I'm a first cousin. So I'm the person who should be yarshin this dikla, this palm tree. So what the Rashbam explains, it's going to take me at least a month till I stop saying Rashi instead of Rashbam says. But the Rashbam explains that this other person, the non-Rav Idi bar Oven, the other party, was stronger than him, and he was able to wrest control of the dikla. But in the end, this thug who had wrested control of the dikla from Idi bar Oven, because we say kol da'alam gvar, in a case where we don't have any way of deciding between the two tainas, you say whoever gets it, gets it. He becomes a muchzik and he keeps it. But this guy, he had an attack of conscience, and he went to Rav Idi bar Oven, and he says, you know what, you were right. You're really the cousin, and I'm the second cousin. Okmer chizde biyade. So Chizda said, okay, you got to hand over the dikla to Rav Idi bar Oven. Amalei, lahadali peri de acha mehu yumad hashta. Rav Idi bar Oven said, I'm not yet whole. This guy lied from the beginning, and it's my palm tree, and I should have gotten the payers of the last 2 years. I want him to compensate me for that, for the whole time he's been holding on to it. Amr, so Rav Chizda said back to Rav Idi bar Oven, Zeu sha'imr lavadim gadalu. They call Rav Idi bar Oven Adam Gadol. Aman kosamich mar ahai. What are you being saimich on? To say that you should get the palm tree on that which he said that you are the karv. But he had originally said, you had originally said that you were the one. He had originally said that he was the karv. So the way Rashi said, the way the Rashbam says it. Let's see the bottom Rashbam where he explains his shita. The only reason why you're getting it now is because he was moide. But you until now he was saying he was the closer relative. Didn't call down gvar. It's not that he's saying be moida that I'm lying from the beginning. We look at it as if he's giving him matana at this point because he had already won. He didn't have to do anything. Even though he didn't really have a good taina in adin, but since he had the ability to just leave things as they were and keep it, so now it's looked on as a matana. The other Rishonim have the Taisvus and the Rabbeinu Tam have different shot and they have a very hard time understanding it. So there's first of all the Rashba. If you look at the Taisvus, Hakasin Saif Oidilei, but like Garis the EU Karav Tfei. So there's one shot that says he never was Maida that Idi Bar Avin was a closer Karav. He was just Maida, I'm giving it to you. So that would the Rashbam would make a little bit more sense. He wasn't, because it's hard to understand why we should say he shouldn't keep based on a false, false claim that he's now giving a matana. We say we ignore the fact that he made a false claim earlier. If he's saying that I'm moida that you were right from the beginning, why shouldn't he have to compensate it from it? If you look on Amud Beis, the Rashbam says later on in the middle, a different pshat. Haga lohi el shahoida she'achal haperes el k'dim farsh harav v'soif lohi le shahoida al achilas haperes ele edim hayu she'achal level hayu yachal lichbar b'shar le maradami. He says a whole different pshat that Adam came and said it really belonged to him, and the question was how much peres we were talking about. So just be aware that Rashbam brings an entirely different pshat in this Gemara that doesn't have to do with him being moida, has to do with Adam, and the question is how much was he moida that he ate the peres? Okay. So so Abaye and Rava l'sfiru l'hader of Chisda. Abaye and Rava did not hold of this svara, keeping the ID. They say, like we just said, since he was maida that he was wrong from the beginning, so then he has to provide for the peres also. He has no taina. He can't say that I'm a muchsik without having a taina to substantiate why he kept the peres for those 2 years. Okay, we'll give another couple of minutes. One, Reuven says, this is my father's karka. And Shimon says, this is my father's karka. I see Sadi Davasehu. And Reuven brings Adam. Reuven brings Adam, that it was his father's. And not only was it his father's, that his father never sold it to Shimon's father. And Shimon brings Adam, that in addition to his taina that was his father's, that he ate Shani Chazak. Amar of Chisda, Ma'al l'shakar. We say amigo. He could have said, it's very nice that you have Adam, but I could have still claimed that that your Adam say that it belonged to you, but you sold it to me, and I ate it from Shani Chazaka. Abai and Rav again dispute Rav Chisda. So they say that even I've always had a hard time understanding. I remember having a hard time with this back in 10th grade. They seem to say that the Adam that said that it was his father's and that his father didn't sell it are somehow contradicting this conclusion that we want to say that he's saying. I guess he's contradicting the conclusion that he's saying that it was my father's. Even though he's a migu to say that I could have said a chazaka, and that would have worked, but the taina that he's saying is contradicted by Adam. So a migu cannot make a taina that's contradicted by Adam overcome the edus. Very similar to what we saw before 2 blot earlier. Huda amalei lechabre, my boy is b'hayara. Reuven said to Shimon, "What are you doing on my land? Amalei minach zavina. I bought it from you, and I've been here for 3 years. Also, I see Sadi, the achla tartishni, but he could only produce Adam for 2 of those 3 years that he said that Shimon said that he was a muksik. Amar Nachman hadra arav a hadra peir. Nachman said, first of all, the land has to go back. That's obvious. He doesn't have shani chazaka. So he says to him, "Where's your star? If you don't have excuse for not having a star after 2 years. You have to wait 3 years." For Hadra Peri, in addition, whatever Paris he ate during those 2 years, he has to return to Ruvain. Amar of Zvid, if instead of making a taina that I bought it from Ruvain, he says instead that I didn't buy it from Ruvain, I just bought the rights to the Paris for these 2 years. Then he's Neman. If he makes such a taina that he has Adam that he was there for 2 years, he doesn't have to reimburse Ruvain for the Paris of 2 years. Lami Amar of Yehuda. Why is this? Because we saw Lagabi Rabbi Yehuda. Haiman de Noket Magla V'chtuvli. Someone who has the tools that they use to harvest dates. V'amar Ezel Igdere Ledikla de Planya the Zavnale. And I said, I'm going now to harvest the dates from this date tree that this person sold me the dates for 2 years. Mehamani's believed. Why is it? For a person to go and walk into someone else's property, knowing that he doesn't own anything there, and claim that he bought the rights to the Paris when he doesn't own anything at all, when it's not true, that's too much of a chutzpah. He doesn't feel like enough at ease. It's one thing if a person has some right, and he bought something, as we're going to see, when he makes a taina for Ara, it's different. But to come and say that I bought the rights to Paris, a person doesn't have the chutzpah to make such a taina. So that's why, if he would have made the taina that these 2 years he was eating it, he would be believed, because there's an anand sadi that he wouldn't have lied about. So if that's the case, why do we say you need a chesed gimel shan? Why do we say you only need you don't need any chazaka, because a person will never have the chutzpah to claim that a land that's not his he bought. It's like the Gemara, no. Ara amile achvi shtarcha. By a land, there's we always tell him gabi land if it's less than 3 years. We say, where's your star? You have to have gotten a star, and where's your star? So tomorrow, and if he can't produce it, then he doesn't get the land. So why don't we have the same taina legabi the Paris? So ask him, where's your star that you bought the Paris? So tomorrow, star the inchi. That's not a normal thing. Normally, if you buy the rights to Paris, that's done orally. So his lack of having a star doesn't prove that he doesn't have it. Since he doesn't have that claim against him, so then the chotz of inish is enough to buttress. That's an anand sadi, and therefore he's believed. Okay, we'll stop over here, and tomorrow we're going to see the famous Naska de Ravaba. No, I'm sorry, not tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to take off. Rafal's in transit, and I'm a little bit in transit, and we'll resume Bez Hashem Monday at 7.
Wonderful.
In show?
I don't think I'm going to be. Probably not.
Probably not.
I'll let
Okay.
you know if it changes.
Okay.